Did you know that one of the deadliest lakes in America sits on top of the ruins of a black town? It's home to one of the wealthiest communities in the Atlanta area today, and it's almost entirely white. I'm going to tell you the history of this historic black community just outside of Metro Atlanta, but I also want you to imagine what it could have been. I'm Garrison Hayes, and this is Town on Fire, a 5-part series about the history of lost black economies across America and the lessons they can teach us today. Like most race massacres in the early 20th century, what happened in Oscarville, a town in Forsyth County, Georgia, started with false accusations against black residents with no evidence. In 1912, Oscarville was a thriving black community full of carpenters, blacksmiths, bricklayers, and farmers. According to census data, at least 58 black families were landowners in this town. But in late August of 1912, things changed. 18-year-old Mae Crow, a white resident, was found severely injured in the woods near her home on the outskirts of the all-black Oscarville community. Crow was in a coma for weeks before tragically dying from her injuries. The night of her death marked the beginning of the end for Oscarville. Despite there being no witnesses, no testimony, and nothing pointing to a black perpetrator, multiple black residents, including a 24-year-old farmhand named Robert Edwards, were named as suspects and arrested for a crime they insisted they did not commit. A white mob would swiftly set fire to this town, destroying black churches, businesses, and homes. They'd kidnap Robert Edwards from the jail, beat him to death, and hang him from a telephone pole in the town square. An all-white jury would quickly convict and hang 2 black teenage boys in front of a crowd of 5,000 people. Their names were Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel. In less than a decade, Forsyth County became so hostile that black people were forced to flee from the county entirely, grinding the black population in just a few years from well over 1,000 to 0. Around 30 years later, Lake Lanier, named after the Confederate soldier Sidney Lanier, was born. Built on top of the land that once belonged to Oscarville, the construction of this lake has long been seen by some as the final step in destroying the remnants of this black town. In fact, as bulldozers and excavators began their work, they uncovered the long-buried remains of this storied black community. Homes, churches, and graves unearthed, revealing a deliberately erased part of history. Today, the Lake Lanier community boasts one of the highest median incomes in the Metro Atlanta area. Over the years, hundreds of people have lost their lives here, making Lake Lanier one of the deadliest lakes in America. And though the lake draws tens of millions of visitors, earning the region an estimated $5 billion annually, very few of the black landowners from Oscarville were compensated for their properties at the time, and none have received justice for the wrong they endured since. While the story of Oscarville is distressing, it isn't unique. Black communities faced land theft and terrorism exactly like this all throughout the 20th century.
The history of violence that black people and black communities have experienced wasn't random. It was systematic. It was targeted. It often resulted from envy. At the end of the Civil War, black people owned virtually no land. By 1910, black people had accumulated over 16 million acres of land. That was the peak of ownership of land for black Americans. By 1997, over 90% of that land had been lost. My colleagues and I estimate conservatively that value of that land that was lost is about $326 billion.
Which means you can't understand today's racial wealth gap or the economic state of the black community without understanding events exactly like this one. And unfortunately, Oscarville isn't the only place this happened. This is Town on Fire, a 5-part series about the history of lost black economies and the lessons we can learn from them today.